Hello and happy Friday afternoon. This is an unusual one for me. I'm just jumping on live to talk about something that I'm super excited about and just came out this afternoon on the Skilled Consultant. So, if you're one of the 2,000 odd people who subscribe to that, you'll have got it through in your emails. And it's the first time that we've shared this concept of the consulting archetypes. And I just wanted to explain a bit about where that's come from, why I developed it, how I think it's useful. Obviously, dive into the article on the Skilled Consultant if you want to read a bit more about it. It's something we've been using with our paid for clients in training sessions and testing out with them, and it seems to be landing and resonating. So yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about it. The genesis of this actually comes from my life outside of consulting, where you may know that I do quite a lot of personal growth work and men's work, and particularly with an organization called the Mankind Project. And one of the foundational frameworks that we use is this idea of archetypes that was developed by a guy called Robert Moore. And broadly speaking, we talk about 4 archetypes in that work. There's a lover, a warrior, a magician, and a sovereign. And they really represent like different energy states, mindsets that people can step into to help them get through a certain type of experience. So we'll talk about like, oh, you need to be more warrior on this. You need to hold your boundaries, speak cleanly, be courageous. Or this situation calls for more lover energy where you're being more gentle and connecting. And I've personally found that like really, really valuable in my own personal life, in my relationships, and being a dad, and in work relationships as well. And I've been thinking for a while. There's a kind of strange complexity that sits with the consulting job, and so as I'm thinking about that in my personal life, and I'm thinking about my life as a consultant, and like the thing that brings it to life for me a lot is like how many times have junior consultants been asked by their partner like, "What's the so what on this slide? Why? What's the thing? Why should the client care about this? What story are we trying to tell?" And that behind that represents the tension between the analyst type archetype that a junior consultant is often sitting in, crunching data, trying to get to the answer, trying to triangulate bits of information to work out what's really going on so they can solve the problem for their client. And the opposite end of that, which is the storyteller archetype, which is suddenly you've got to stop all the crunching and pull up and be in a completely different mindset to tell that story to a client who may not be comfortable with the story, may not really understand it. They want to get clarity, etc. And you've got to flip your mindset in quite a significant way. And that's just one example of the type of tension and complexity that exists for a lot of consultants. And as I've worked that through and talked to a lot of consultants over the years, and really in the last couple of years as I've been refining this idea, I've landed on 8 different consulting archetypes, and there's tensions between all of them. And I've introduced that publicly for the first time in the article that went out today on the Skilled Consultant. You can check that out if you go to blog.honeycombps.co.uk or just Google the Skilled Consultant Derry Hughes. You'll find it as the first article on there. For this, I just wanted to share like the overall framework that I've got. So this is literally the article that you'll find if you want to go and take a look at that. But these are the 8 archetypes, and you can see they're in pairs, they're on axes, and there's a natural tension that exists between all 8. My judgment is that a truly master consultant will have the ability to duck and dive between each of these 8 different areas. Nobody can operate in all of them simultaneously. It doesn't work like that. But there will be times when you have to step into one of them more than another. And doing that consciously, doing that proactively, and using this as a shared language within your team can be really powerful. So if I just quickly introduce them, read the article if you want more. I'm going to be writing a lot more about the detail that sits underneath this as well, and what happens when certain archetypes are over-indexed or under-indexed when you're trying to step into them. But on this north-south axis in the middle, we've got the sage versus the deliverer. So the sage is the grey-haired wise woman who is explaining from her own intuition and experience exactly what the answer is likely to be, versus the deliverer, who is the person who's cracking on and getting stuff done. And those are natural tensions and different mindsets that you might need to step into. Across the middle, you've got on the left, in the west, as it were, the challenger, and in the east, the nurturer. And this is the tension between the emotional intimacy that we know is so important for building trust and being a source of comfort for clients. How often have you had clients say to you, God, it feels like I'm in a therapy session, or, oh, sorry for talking so much about this? Because as consultants, we often drop into that space for clients, and they start to open up to us when they feel comforted. But also on the opposite side to that, you've got the challenger that requires a level of candor and honesty and directness that can feel really scary at times. And that nurturer challenger tension, some people will naturally sit on one side or the other. If you're familiar with the concept of radical candor and being compassionately direct with people, then that's the tension between those two that you might recognize as well. Then you've got the analyst storyteller dimension that I was talking about earlier, where the analyst is really in the mindset of, how do I solve this problem? How do I gather the data together to really understand what is going on? And the storyteller is the person that is fundamentally trying to inspire people to change, inspire someone to do something differently. And the image I have there is of the grand room, and they're up presenting with full of confidence, telling the audience exactly what they need to hear to understand what's going on, to really remember it, and to take action off the back of it. And again, there's a real tension there. Lots of people struggle to step from analyst into storyteller mode. And then finally, you've got the innovator orchestrator dimension. So the innovator is the creative energy that's trying to paint an imaginative future, trying to break past the limiting beliefs that the consulting team might have or the client team might have, and come up with creative answers. And there, again, there's a tension there, because if you go too far with that, you can come up with completely impractical suggestions that don't work in the real world that the client operates in. Opposite that, you've got the orchestrator, who is the person that is going to make all of the parts of this project work together, who's going to talk to all of the different bits of the organization and make sure that every single piece of it is pulling together in the right way, that they're mobilizing the change that is necessary. So the innovator is the person who's like coming up with the grand ideas. The orchestrator is the person who's making that change happen on the ground. So broadly speaking, at the top of this little compass diagram, you've got the people who are thinking big, who are sharing experience, who are like using every bit of their judgment and intuition to come up with and compel and inspire what people to change. And on the bottom, you've got the people who are actually getting stuff done. And I say people, these aren't separate people. These are mindsets and energy states that you can step into when you want to think a little differently about something, when you want to bring a different energy. So the way that people use this is they might say, for this workshop that's coming up, we really need to step into storyteller mode. We've been too much heads down in deliverer and analyst. We've got to step into storyteller, or the client is not going to come on the journey with us. Or, I know this is really hard for you, but the client needs to hear some difficult messages. Get your head into challenger mode. Make sure you've got enough nurturer to stay clean with it, but get into challenger mode and be brave to deliver those messages. Those are the types of conversations that are starting to happen with people that are using this consulting archetypes framework. So if that resonates with you, then I'd love to just hear how you might use it, where you might sit, where your natural center of gravity is on these different axes, where you find the biggest stretch and what is challenging for you to step into, and what do you think of it? Is this a useful tool for you? How are you going to use it? I'd love to hear about that. If it doesn't resonate with you, I'd love to hear that too. Let me know. I'm always up for discussion and debate around this. I'm personally finding it super useful for myself in my consulting work. The clients we're talking to about it are finding it really useful and developing that common language around it. So would love to hear what you think, and have a great weekend in the meantime. Thanks, everybody.